This is FE Peer Review. The date is the 8th of February 2022. Matt Powell continues to preach falsehoods and hypocrisy. This evening, Arctic Reflections released a video in which he expressed very justified, righteous indignation and almost anger at Matt Powell for the vile things that Matt Powell preaches. I'll put a link to that video in the description. I believe that Mr. Sensible is also working on a video response to Matt Powell. When he releases it, I will also link to that. I'm not going to produce a new video on this subject. Last year, I produced a video in response to a similar sermon by Matt Powell, and I'm simply going to repost that here. The video I made last year does not express the righteous indignation that I think Matt Powell deserves to be on the receiving end of, which Arctic Reflections does so well. I came to it from a little different direction, but I thought it would be appropriate at this time to re-release it, and perhaps some of my newer subscribers will not have seen it anyway. So here goes. I hope you find it worthwhile. Thank you very much, and do please visit Arctic Reflections and Mr. Sensible.
This is FE Peer Review. The date is May the 11th, 2021. Matt Powell preaches falsehoods and hypocrisy. This video is in response to a recent video by Matt Powell entitled Evolution Inspired Columbine. I'm not including lots of colorful pictures and cool motion graphics because I think Matt Powell is enough of an adult not to need those things. This is just going to be words, but very carefully and thoughtfully chosen words. Matt Powell's premise is that Klebold and Harris's atheist beliefs were the cause that led them to mass murder, and that by extension, had they not been atheists, had they been God-fearing theists like Powell, they would not have gone that route. He uses this to propound that atheism in general opens the door to this kind of sociopathic and psychopathic behavior, and that atheists place themselves in danger of becoming like Klebold and Harris. By the way, the asterisks, I will be including references in the description, and they relate to the references. Both logically and in the face of massive evidence, this premise is fundamentally flawed, and in consequence, his conclusion is false. Klebold and Harris were never psychologically evaluated while alive, since they did not come to the attention of the public until after they were dead. After the fact, qualified medical personnel have agreed that Harris would very likely have been diagnosed a psychopath during his lifetime, while Klebold may not have, but was definitely suffering from depression. No less an authority than the FBI itself came to this conclusion. Their behaviors emerged from their mental illnesses. Now I will address the logical fallacy that lies at the root of Powell's statement. Premise 1. Powell claims they were atheists. They may or may not have been atheists. For now, for the sake of argument, I will grant that they were. Premise 2. Powell claims that their actions were motivated by their, quote, atheist beliefs. This flies in the face of the evidence of the best medical experts in the field of psychology hired by the FBI to analyze this event. These experts state that their actions were the results of their mental illnesses. Atheism may or may not have served as an excuse around which Harris could construct a justification for his actions, but the root causes of his actions were in his mental illness. Klebold, depressed and the weaker of the two, was in large part carried along by Harris's psychopathic energy. But despite all that evidence, for now, for the sake of argument, I will grant Powell's claim that atheism motivated their actions. Conclusion. Powell then concludes that their lack of a belief in God, and some related lack of a sense of self-control, which he believes is a result of that lack of belief, meant there was nothing to stop them from murdering. Thus, anyone who is an atheist, and consequently who has that same lack of a sense of self-control, poses a danger as a potential mass murderer. Here is the problem with Powell's argument. We only need find one theist who is also a mass murderer to show that both theists and atheists are capable of being mass murderers. Therefore, whether people do or do not believe in the existence of one or more gods does not eliminate the possibility of them becoming mass murderers. If an atheist can become a mass murderer, and if a theist can become a mass murderer, then the differentiation between whether people are atheists or theists tells us nothing about whether they can become mass murderers. Further down, I will see if we can find one theist who was also a mass murderer. But first, one more point. One might argue that theists can become mass murderers but do not murder because of their belief in a god, whereas Klebold and Harris may have murdered because of their atheist belief. In that case, we need find only one theist mass murderer who murdered specifically because of his or her theist belief. Here are three names you may recognize. All were active church members, but none professed to kill due to their religious convictions. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, bind, torture, kill. A longtime member of the Christ Lutheran Church and elected president of the church council, Rader was a serial killer, murdering at least 10 people between 1974 and 1991, including men, women, and children. In one case, he took the body of a female victim to his church, where he photographed her dead body in various bondage positions. Dennis Rader did not profess to any religious motive behind his murders. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. Ridgway was not born into a religious family. When he was in his mid-20s, he actively joined two churches, one Baptist and the other Pentecostal. He frequently read the Bible at work and regularly proselytized door to door. His ex-wife described his religious interest as, quote, fanatical. When he was not busy with work or his religious activities, he would track down prostitutes, take them to remote country areas, and murder them while having sex with them. He claims to have lost count of his victims. He was convicted for 49 murders, but investigators say that his victims likely number more than 71. Not all his victims were prostitutes, and the youngest may have been 12. Ted Bundy. Bundy joined the Church of the Latter-day Saints when he was 27 years old. He had started murdering a few years before and kept on murdering for several years after. He confessed to 30 murders, usually involving rape. He was executed at the age of 48, still a member of the LDS. At this point, I need to remind Matt Powell that it is not for him to claim that these church-going men did not believe in God. He does not know what went on in their minds. They profess their belief in God through their church-related activities. Their normal actions related to church involvement were in every way congruent with having a belief in God and maintaining a sincere and active involvement in their church, just as I expect Matt Powell remains active in his church. Here's a name that was just recently in the news, Robert Aaron Long. Long was born into a religious family, his father being very active in a Southern Baptist congregation. Robert remained actively involved in his church right up to the day in which he went to a massage parlor in Atlanta and murdered 8 women. Quote, according to the police, Long described his actions as being the result of a sex addiction that conflicted with his religious beliefs. Long claims that his murders were directly the result of his religious beliefs. I choose not to assume that means that all Southern Baptists or theists are potential mass murderers because of their religious beliefs. Instead, until I have evidence to the contrary, I will assume that his actions were the result of his own personal psychological problems, and that his belief in the existence of a God is in no way the root cause of his murderous actions. I had said I needed only one example. I have given 4 above. Information about them can be readily obtained from various internet sources, including Wikipedia and news reports, so I will not be including references here. Looking outside recent decades in the USA, we can find many historical incidents which demonstrate mass murders done specifically in the name of religion and professedly motivated by a belief in the Christian God. For example, we can look at the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre in France in 1572, when some 2,000 Protestants were murdered by Catholics over the course of several weeks. The reigns of Henry VIII, Queen Mary I, and Queen Elizabeth I provide examples of Protestants murdering Catholics and vice versa. During Henry VIII's reign, England broke away from the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church was established. Many prominent Catholics, including St. Thomas More, were murdered, with their murders being motivated by the religious convictions based in the theist worldview of their murderers. When Henry VIII died and his elder daughter Mary I came to the throne, she reinstituted the Catholic Church in England and promptly set about murdering hundreds of prominent Anglicans. She was known as Bloody Mary, and it was not because the cocktail of that name was her favorite drink. When she died, after just 2 years on the throne, her younger sister Elizabeth I became queen, reinstituted the Anglican Church, and promptly set about murdering Catholics by the hundreds, far more than Klebold and Harris were ever able to kill. So there you have it, Matt. Your case for atheists as mass murderers because they don't believe in your God has no legs to stand on. It is built entirely on a logical fallacy and your own fear and misunderstanding. But I assure you, you have no reason to be fearful. We aren't going to hurt you. If you persist in saying stupid and incredibly rude, some have said evil, things in public, you can expect a vigorous response. But that's nothing to fear. It's just the free expression of ideas. A word of advice. Running off to Dr. Kent Hovind for protection does not look good. You may be better off defending yourself rather than hiding behind his skirts. I thought I'd end with just a few more names. There's so much history to draw on, but these figures are, I think, of particular and relevant interest. Francisco Franco, Catholic. His troops routinely shot Protestant and atheist people on the basis of their beliefs alone. Martin Luther and John Calvin, both advocates of witch trials and capital punishment for witchcraft. Having reached the end of this, I think it is necessary that I reiterate the fallacy in your statement about atheists. First, yes, we can no doubt find people who murdered explicitly in the name of atheism. Pol Pot and Stalin come to mind. But that was not what your message was. Your message was that a belief in atheism led Klebold and Harris to murder, and by very definite implication, a belief in theism would protect people from that horror. I have provided you with many examples both of people who were theists and murdered, as well as people who murdered in the name of their theistic beliefs. So theists and atheists alike are capable of being mass murderers. In short, whether one believes in the existence of a god or gods, or whether one does not believe, has no bearing on whether people become murderers.